Hello YouTube, my name is Euphorius, and this is EVE Online. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about fitting ships, things to take into consideration when fitting a ship, and how to make the ship perform at its highest level, doing whatever you want that ship to do. So the first thing to take into consideration is what ship you want to fly. If you have a specific ship that you want to fly, what's that ship capable of? You don't want to take a logistics frigate or a logistics cruiser, a ship that's designed to repair other ships, and use that ship for combat or exploration, because there are ships in the game already designed to do that. So if you come over here and look at the ship tree, you see a lot of different ships. Each class of ship, frigate, destroyer, cruiser, battle cruiser, and battleship, they all have kind of different roles in their ship class. Frigates are kind of like smaller ships that are fast, agile. They don't do a whole lot of damage. They don't do a whole lot of anything, but they excel at being small, being cheap for the most part. They are good at tackling or warp disrupting, warp scrambling other ships so they can't get off grid. They have fast lock times most of the time. They're just small and agile. Destroyers are very similar to frigates. They're small, so it's harder to hit them. They have less of a signature in space. But they also pack a lot more firepower than frigates because they can fit a lot more guns or drones or whatever it may be. They're just smaller, high damage dealing ships, so you take that into consideration when you're flying these two small ship classes. When we go up to the next two ship sizes here, we have cruisers and battle cruisers. Cruisers are joked about as being the best ship class in the game because they really are. Cruisers are so versatile within the game. They have relatively small signature radius. They move pretty quickly, or at least they can. There's a lot of different types of cruisers, so they have many different ways they can be fit. And they're just all around, like, there's a lot of different Tech 2 versions. There's just a lot you can do with cruisers in the game. So most of the time when you're doing something, you're going to be flying a cruiser, and unless you're flying tackle or a battleship fleet, cruisers are just the meat of the game. They're just like in a normal fleet. Cruisers are the thing that kind of like holds fleets together, and in EVE Online that is even more true because there's so many of them and they're so versatile. And then we look at battle cruisers and battleships. These are probably the two least used ships in the game, especially for small gang to medium gang warfare. They're just fairly large, fairly expensive. They can be torn apart by bombers, by smart bombs. They're slow for the most part. Battle cruisers did get a buff. So there are some ships that are better now, but their size, their speed kind of, it's a lot of drawbacks when you have cruisers that are so versatile. Then we have the capitals of the game. All of these ships I've talked about previously are sub-capital ships. Then we have the capital class ships, the dreadnoughts, the supercarriers. These are the supercarriers in each tree. They're the ship with zero estimated price there. Then we have the normal carrier, and then we have the Titan. The Titan and supercarrier are classified as super capital ships because they cannot dock in stations until citadels come out. And then if you have an extra large citadel, you will be able to dock your supercarriers. We're not really going to talk about capital ships today because they are well outside of the scope of what we're talking about. And we're going to focus on subcapitals and what they're used for. So the ship tree you should always consult when learning about a new ship because it gives you a lot of information. You don't specifically have to come to the ship tree, but just going to the info section of the ship, you can see it as well here under traits. The traits of the ship is the first thing you want to consider when fitting a ship. These are the things that are going to benefit you, and you want to fit into your fitting as well as you can. So let's first talk about frigates. So when you go to fit a ship in EVE, every ship has a certain predisposition to what it should be doing. For frigates, each frigate has a different bonus. So you can see the execution here gets bonuses to small energy turrets and propulsion jamming systems cost. Basically what that means is you're getting a reduction to the amount of cap you're using for your energy turrets. You're getting a bonus to damage, and then any propulsion jamming systems that you fit to the ship will get an activation cost bonus as well. So you'll be using less cap, and that is to it's to help the ship not use as much cap and to remain as cap stable as possible. If we look at some of the other ships like the Magnate is definitely an exploration ship. This is the ship you want to use if you're going to be exploring and you want to fly in a Mars ship, at least early on. Because it gets a bonus to probes, it gets a roll bonus to relic and data analyzer virus strength. So the ship, the bonuses that it has, makes it an exploration ship. You don't want to use an executioner for exploration, and you don't want to use the Magnate for combat, because these ships, the bonuses that they get, allow them to do specific things. And it is the same with all of these. The Crucifier, the ship is a E-War frigate. The bonuses that it gets are for E-War modules, so fitting E-War modules to this is what you want to do. So you won't see this used in a DPS role or something like that. It will be used in an E-War role. And the same with all these other frigates. The Inquisitor, this is a logistics ship, so you use this to repair other ships. It gets bonuses to that. Tormentor, this is kind of more of a DPS ship. And then the Punisher, also a DPS ship. It also gets a 4% bonus per level for armor resistances. And then you can see this per level thing. What does that mean? The per level, so for the Punisher here, you see Amar frigate bonuses per level. So you'll get a bonus to each of these things multiplied by the level of the ship. So if you have level 3 Amar frigate, you will get a 30% reduction in small energy turret activation cost. And if you have level 3 Amar frigate, you will get a 12% bonus to armor resistances. That's a pretty big bonus, especially at level 15. That's 20%. Or level 5, that's 20%. So you look at these bonuses, and then you kind of get an idea of what you want to fit. So for the Punisher, you obviously want to use small energy turrets, and you want to use you want to fit tank to it, either armor plates to give it more HP, or extra resistance modules to help it take less damage. So I said armor. Why would I fit armor to the Punisher? Generally speaking, Amar ships, Galente ships are all armor, with some exceptions. That's just due to it having more armor HP. Minmatar is kind of bi-tankable. The ships are normally very close on armor and shield. Some ships are better for one or the other, but you can kind of fit them either or. Caldari is all shield tank. And then with Galente, you have a few ships, specifically the Brutix, the Thorax is pretty good. These ships are good at hull tanking. Hull tanking isn't super useful because there's no modules that are really effective at repairing armor or hull hit points. So in general, you only see shield or armor tank. Hull tank can be useful if you are working on, if you're trying to surprise an enemy or something, and you can fit a lot of resistances on it, so you can fit a lot of tank in hull, but it's only really good for like solo or small gang things where you're not going to have Logi to rep you. So we talked about a little about the kind of T1 ships down here, this bottom row of ships. We talked about their different bonuses. Different ships have different bonuses. And here in the cruisers, you can see these are logistic ships as well. They get a bonus to repping friendly ships or ships in general. Then you kind of come up here towards the top and you see these ships with a 2 here, and then even a 3 here with the destroyer and the strategic cruiser. These are Tech 2 and Tech 3 ships. They're advanced ships. They all require you to have level 5 of that race's either frigate, destroyer, cruiser, whichever. These are even more specialized than the ships below, and they all have very specific roles, with some mild exceptions. For the frigates, you see interceptors here. Interceptors are nullified, which means that they aren't affected by warp disruption bubbles. They are generally used for tackling, for getting across the sector or the battlefield very quickly. They're very quick. Assault frigates, they're kind of like tankier frigates. They're really good for brawling. They're really, really tanky for frigates, and they're just good overall ships. Good for solo PvP and small gang stuff. We have Covert Ops. You have the exploration class ship for each race here, and you also have the stealth bomber for each race here. And again, these ships, they all have certain bonuses you want to take into effect. The exploration ship here gets bonuses to exploration stuff. So if you're exploring, you want to use these bonuses to your advantage. You want to be fitting data and relic analyzers. You want to be fitting a Covert Ops cloak. You want to be fitting, probes. You don't want to be fitting, just a lot of tank and stuff to this or anything like that, because it doesn't get bonuses to that. Another thing is you always want to use the guns that you get bonus to. So for the slasher here, you don't want to fit small energy turrets because that has a bonus to small projectile turrets. You always want to use the bonuses if you can. And you can do things, you can do weird things. You can fit stuff that doesn't make sense, but it's never going to be as effective as if you were to go along with the bonuses. So I talked a little bit about armor and shield tanking and hull tanking, but there's a couple other different types of tank you can do. You can do speed tanking. That is where your ship goes. You just put as much speed into your ship as possible so that you're harder to track and harder to hit. This is especially good against bigger ships with bigger guns that have harder time tracking smaller targets. So frigates are really good at this. Some destroyers, you generally want your ship to go as fast as possible to eliminate the target's ability to hit you. So you're not adding tank in the way that you would think of it in another MMO. You don't have more HP or more resistances. You're just harder to hit. There's also Sig Tanking, and basically your ship's signature is how big it looks to the guns. So if the smaller your signature, again, the harder you're going to be able to hit. And while these two are very similar, you fit modules for different ones. And sometimes you fit these together so that you're just harder to hit in general. But generally, if you're speed tanking, you want to use Microderm Drive, and you're kind of going for a different end goal. Then, after we have, so you have your ship, you kind of have an idea of what kind of bonuses it has, so you have a starting point for fitting your ship. Next, let's talk about skills. Skills are incredibly important when fitting a ship. And I have really bad engineering skills, but we're going to talk about engineering. If you go to your skills and go to the certificates here, you can go down to core spaceship operation, and if you hit show info here, you can see this is masteries for your spaceship. It's kind of a guideline to help you train skills. And core spaceship operation is one that you want to have trained because it is so essential in every situation. You're always going to be using ships in EVE for the most part, and you're always going to be fitting things to those ships. So if we look at the engineering skills here, you can see 7 skills. Science 1, every character starts with that, and then some other skills here. Almost all of these skills, except for capacitor management, capacitor systems operation, they're used in fitting your ship. They give you CPU management, gives you bonuses to the CPU output of your ship. Power grid management gives you bonus power grid to your ship, and then the others give it reduces the amount of power grid or CPU a module uses if it requires this skill. So these skills are very important when it comes to fitting a ship, and the higher these skills, the more likely it is that you will be able to fit a ship. Each ship has a certain amount of CPU and power grid. They're right here. These can be modified through skills, through rigs that go up here, and through some implants give a bonus to power grid or CPU. If you're going to fit rigs to your ship, you have to take into account it is going to boost your CPU or power grid, but those rigs are something that you're not going to be able to take off the ship, because if you try to remove them, they will be destroyed, and B, they're taking up slots that could be used for other types of rigs, such as, polycarbonate engine housing to make you faster, or more tank. So you want to get to a point where your skills give you as much fitting room as possible, so you can rely on those rigs and implants less. But sometimes you're going to have to if you want to fit specific things. So we have now talked about all of the intricacies in the things that lead up to you fitting your ship. So you've picked out your ship, you know what bonuses it gets, you have all your skills trained up, you have implants in if you need them for the extra fitting room. Well, now what do we fit to your ship? So I'm going to kind of go through the different types of things that can be fit to a ship and different reasons for fitting them. Okay, so if we come over here to the market, we see a bunch of different categories of ship modules. Let's not start with EVE. Let's start with turrets. Turrets are kind of essential to EVE. EVE is a game about space warfare. People kill each other, they kill things. Turrets are a big part of that. So within the turrets tab here, you can see we have a bunch of different turret types. This is going to be highly dependent on what bonuses your ship gets. These turrets also depending on which turrets you're using, it'll depend on which ammo you use. And the size of your ship will determine which guns you will use. So frigates and destroyers, they use small guns. Cruisers and all but attack battle cruisers use medium guns. Attack battle cruisers can fit large guns. And then the battleships, they use large guns, and then capitals use extra large guns. Each type of turret has kind of a long range and a short range version. It's kind of different with energy and missiles, but it's basically follow those lines. So for hybrid turrets, you have rails. Rail guns are long range, and blasters are short range. And then if we look at small blasters, for example, you see a lot of different modules here. Which ones do I pick to put on my ship? There's so many options. You might think price is the best. You might think, well, obviously these are Tech 2s. Those are better, and that is true. But if you look a little closer, you can see there are kind of 3 categories here within the small blasters. They're electron, ion, and neutron. Each of these are a little bit different, and it pretty much comes down to fitting and damage. The neutron blasters, These do the most damage, but they also require the most fitting power. If we scroll down here to where these three types are, you can see the Light Neutron Blaster is 9 power grid, and 9 power grid and 18 CPU. And then as we go down to ions and electrons, they take up less fitting room. So when picking your guns here, you have to weigh the trade-off of damage and fitting. So if you're having trouble fitting guns on your ship, you don't have enough room, you can move down to one of these lower tier modules. As well as that, you can see a whole host of named or meta modules here. These are even easier to fit to ships, so you can see the regulated light neutron phase cannon here is 8 power grid and 13 CPU compared to the 9 power grid and 18 CPU of the Tech 2s. So if you're having trouble fitting to the ships, you can use these meta modules. Meta modules are better than the T1 versions, so the Light Neutron Blaster is worse than the Limited Light, the Anode Light Neutron, Modal Light Neutron. In almost every way, the metas get better bonuses, they take less fitting in most cases, but they also can't be built. Meta modules are only found by killing NPCs and that sort of thing, but Tech 1 and Tech 2 can be built. So you have to take into account these trade-offs of fitting and damage, and accessibility is another thing. If you're living out in nullsec and you don't have the rats that drop, the pirates, the rats that drop these meta modules, you might have to use the T1 versions or the T2 versions if you can produce the T2 versions. So you have to kind of take into account all these things when fitting a ship as far as guns go. So you kind of pick the guns that work best for you. If you're fitting your ship for long range, you want to fit long range guns, and then you want to fit modules that support that. If you're fitting shield tank or armor tank or close range, you want to build your ship to work around that concept as much as possible. You want to pick long range, you want to pick short range. You don't want to do all of the different, you don't want your ship to be good at everything, because it's not possible. You want to focus your ship in one area. So fit blasters if you wanted to be close range, or fit rails if you wanted to be long range. Another thing is to always make sure you're fitting the same type of weapon to your ship. You don't want to have a light electron blaster, a light ion blaster, and a light neutron blaster on your ship. It's very inefficient. You will be firing at different ranges. You won't be able to group your weapons. It's imperative that you fit all of the same modules to your ship. You want to do this to decrease the number of variables. EVE is so much about decreasing the variables on your side and increasing the variables on the other side. Information and knowing what your opponent has and keeping your opponent on their toes will allow you to perform the best in the game. So fitting around one specific idea and then making it as easy on yourself as you make it as hard on your opponent is the best way to be successful in EVE. So by fitting all the same guns, you're able to group your guns, which makes it easier to fire. You can volley ships a lot easier. It just makes combat a lot easier. As well as fitting around one idea, you don't want to go armor tank and shield tank and hull tank. You don't want to fit as much tank as possible. Under some circumstances you might, but in general you want to pick either armor or shield or hull, and then use the other slots on your ship to improve what you're doing in that area. So if you pick shield tank, your shield tank will all go in your mid slots, and then you have your low slots to fit damage modules or things to help guns, things to improve your DPS. If you fit armor tank, you can use those mid slots for webs, scrams, propulsion modules. You generally want to have a propulsion module in most cases anyway, but by fitting around one specific idea, you allow your ship to become more versatile and more specialized at the same time, which is really good when you're fitting ships. So that's kind of the gist of turrets. Each kind of class here, you can look through and see the optimal ranges and stuff of each one, kind of what they're designed for. Weapon upgrades here. Each weapon upgrade is designed for a different type of weapon. So blasters won't use the same type of weapon upgrades as energy turrets, which won't use the same upgrades as missiles, which won't use the same upgrades as projectiles. Each module here kind of is used for a different purpose. Magnetic field stabilizers are for hybrid turrets. Heat sinks are for your energy, gyros are for projectiles, and ballistics are for missiles. And these kind of follow the same guidelines as the turrets. There are a bunch of different modules here. They follow the same principles of trading damage or ability for fitting space. And then there are a bunch of different things, guidance computers. You just kind of have to look through these different modules and kind of understand what they do and how they can be useful in your ship. If you're fitting for a long-range missile fit, you might put some guidance computers or enhancers on here to make them more long-range. If you're fitting long-range guns, you might put a tracking computer, tracking enhancer to improve the tracking of your guns and be able to hit more consistently. Because it's not always about the DPS of your ship. It's largely, when you're fitting your ship, about being able to apply that damage. Because a lot of times you will not be able to apply your DPS because an enemy ship is going too fast, or it's too agile, it's too small. So there are all these different upgrades that can help you improve your ability to do damage. There are different drone upgrades. If you have a ship that has a big drone bay or is focused on drones, you want to be using drone upgrades. Things like Vexers, Arbitrators, Tristans, these excel with using drones, so you want to keep that in mind when you're fitting a ship. You might want to use a high slot for a drone link augmenter if you want your drones to be able to go and attack at further ranges. Then we come up, there are different shield modules. Shields, again, if you're fitting for shield, you don't want to fit armor as well. So there are different shield modules here. There are shield boosters. There are shield boosters let you regenerate your shield on your ship. Remote shield boosters allow you to regenerate shield on a friendly ship. So if you're fitting a logistics ship, you want remote shield boosters so that you can heal your friendly ships in your fleet. There are shield extenders. These give you more HP on your shield. And then there are shield hardeners, which increase your resistances to damage. So when fitting a ship for shield tank, you want to take into account, do you want more shield hit points? Do you want more shield resistances? Because if you have more shield HP, then it's going to take longer to get through that. But if you have more resistances, you'll take less incoming damage. So generally, having more resistance is better if you're going to be repaired or you're using a self-repair, because you're minimizing that incoming damage while increasing your HP at a constant rate through a shield booster. The same with armor tanking. There's some other shield modules here that are used for passive tanking. There are also kind of active and passive versions of different resistance modules. The active ones use capacitor, but they give you a higher bonus to your resistances, while the inactive ones don't use capacitor and give you a lower bonus. So you want to take these into account. All of these things mostly are going to go in your medium slots. There's scanning equipment, This is anything for scanning, mostly exploration ships, because they get bonuses to these things. Propulsion modules. These are micro warp drives, afterburners, microderm drives, and I think warp core stabilizers. Anything that affects your propulsion. Here, microderm drives can only be used on battle cruisers and battleships, and they have a spool time when you activate them. And after 8 seconds or so, depending on your skills, you will jump 100 kilometers. Micro warp drives, they are faster, and they also decrease the amount of capacitor you have. So you run out of capacitor faster. They can also be shut off if you are warp scrambler. If someone uses a warp scramble on you, it will turn off your micro warp drive. Afterburners, micro warp drives also give you a penalty to your sig radius. So when you use one, you will look like a bigger target since you're putting out so much extra energy to move your ship. Afterburners, they move slower, but they don't cause you to you don't get a penalty to the amount of capacitor you have, and you don't get the penalty for your signature radius. So they're kind of easier to fit, and you will be cap stable, and you won't have to worry about the penalties that come with micro warp drive. But again, micro warp drive is much faster than an afterburner. Hull and armor. This is pretty explanatory. If you're fitting hull tank or armor tank, these are the modules that you'll be fitting. Again, armor plates, those are to increase your HP, and hardeners increase your resistances to damage. You have repairs. Hull repairs are pretty much useless. They're very bad and just not useful. If you're gonna hull tank, it's better just to have as much HP as possible. And then you have damage control down here. You should almost always be using a damage control. They're such good modules. They give you a bonus to hull, armor, and shield resistances. And you're not supposed to be fitting, you're not really supposed to fit multiple types of tank, but this gives you extra HP across the board, and it's going to give you a bonus to your resistances on armor, shield, or hull. So it's almost always good to have one of these, and when you're starting out, it's something that you can pretty much just put on any ship and get a huge bonus from. There are situations in which you want to use them, but if you don't know why you shouldn't be fitting a damage control, you should be using a damage control. So yeah, armor is pretty self-explanatory. You have harvesting equipment. If you're flying a mining ship, mining ships have bonuses to mining. Things such as Venture, the mining barges, and the exhumers. You want to be using these. Fleet assistance modules. These are things that help your fleet members, whether they be warfare links that boost your skills or ship's abilities, or jump portal generators to jump multiple ships. Those are very situational modules and can only be fit on certain types of ships, and you'll kind of learn about that more as you play the game. Engineering equipment, these types of modules give you bonuses to the amount of CPU, the amount of power grid you have, the recharge rate of your capacitor. There's a couple that give you different shield recharge rates. They basically just trade different types of power grid or CPU or capacitor to give you bonuses in other areas. You have energy NOS Fratus and energy neutralizers. NOSes take capacitor away from enemy ships and gives it to your ship, and neutralizers they just neutralize energy on the enemy ship, but they take a larger amount, but they don't give it to you. Capacitor boosters, these use a type of ammo called a capacitor booster to give you capacitor. So it's just a way to quickly regenerate capacitor on your ship, and capacitor batteries and capacitor rechargers allow you to they increase the amount of capacitor you recharge. Then sensor upgrades and E-War, These are just things that affect the sensors for sensor boosters and electronics. There's cloaks in there. And then for electronic warfare, this is you trying to disrupt enemy ships, whether it be through warp disruptors or warp scramblers, keeping them on the field and unable to warp away, or webbing them so they move at a slower pace. ECM keeps them from being able to lock targets. Sensor dampeners decreases the range that they can lock targets. Tracking disruptors decrease the tracking of their turrets, things like that. So these are kind of like support modules. They go in your mid slots for the most part. And that's kind of ship equipment. So you can see how the different types of ship equipment can be used in different ways to increase your ship's compatibilities. And you want to specialize as much as possible for either your sake or your fleet's sake. You want to be able to mesh well with your friendly ships while being as focused as possible in what your ship can do, so that your ship does that very well and is harder to counter. Finally, I talked a little bit about rigs. Each ship can fit a different number of rigs. T1 ships can fit 3, Tech 2 ships can fit 2, and rigs, they can't be taken off the ship once you put them on, and they give you some bonuses, whether it be HP, resistances, a whole slew of different things. They're Tech 2 and Tech 1 versions, and you don't have to have any skills for this other than freaking 1. I think you start with that. I don't think you have to have any skills, but by training up skills, it lowers the drawbacks of rigs. So I think that's pretty much it for fitting ships. You just kind of want to have an idea of what you want your ship to do, and then use the modules that get bonuses and fit to the ship's strengths while having an idea of what you want your ship to do, whether it be long range or short range, and whether you want it to be a certain type of tank or speed tanking. You really want to focus in on what you want your ship to do. And if you want to run missions and you want to kill NPCs as well as salvaging them, it's better to just have 2 ships. In some cases you can fit a salvager, but it's much faster if you just kill them, come in with another ship and salvage. If you're in a situation where you want to do combat, but you also want to be able to repair multiple ships, you should have ships that are dedicated to DPS and tanking, and also have healers, just like in other MMOs. You want to have ships that can repair other ships if you have enough people, obviously. Otherwise, you can fit local tank. If you are in a fleet and you are flying shield ships, you want to have ships that can repair shields, not ships that can repair armor. So you want to take into all these things when you're fitting ships for personal use or fleet use, and you want to get the most out of your ship with what the ship is capable of. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and I will try to answer the best I can. Thanks for watching. This has been Euphorious. Stay flying.